obviously, if you're going to take one of these cameras and or camera systems and you put it into the water, like one, we're talking about like you don't want to get electrocuted, and you also now have, but it's like beyond that. You don't want it to just turn off. You don't want it to, not get wet, but there's more to it than that, right? There's other kinds of technological advancements and technologies that you're dealing with in order to get that right kind of imagery, especially at that high quality. Can you talk a little bit about that, those kinds of problems?
It's all about trade-offs. And if you're going to shoot something high resolution that's greater than 8K and 360, there isn't a camera out there that does that. And you don't want to have, you know, 8K, red cameras or REs that are stitched together, as that's going to be a 400-pound rig and $1 million. And the wider the cameras are apart, the more disparity you have, the harder it is to stitch. And so you have to figure out what is the smallest camera that shoots the highest resolution, that can be controlled and customized with software to synchronize and handle metadata and globally control them. Because underwater, one of the biggest issues too is white balance. And if you set these cameras to make decisions on their own automatically, the white balance in the ISO just goes nuts because of light and depth and color, and you'll never have a uniform ish color between an image between these cameras. And so global control is like extraordinarily important and very hard to do, because cameras generally weren't made for them to have global control infrastructure. And I begged GoPro to work with me on this and to make it easier. There's a reason why their stock is at $1.50 right now, because they just like missed the boat significantly, because the size was great and the cost was great, but they just didn't have a desire to improve the access to the controls and allow you to get to the board. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can have above water, you can have a 220-degree lens, from Izugar, for example. They make these fisheye lenses, but underwater, you only get 175. You're 170 at best. So you can't have cameras that are back to back in the same way. You need more cameras. You need more power, more more everything. And that's when things get out of hand really quickly, and why you don't see a lot of people in the space trying to figure this out.
Right. Now, can you also talk about like the sensory technology, right? And the integration of the sensory technology, because it's not the same right now, right? For above ground versus, under the water.
Yeah, I mean, I think where you're going with that is that an RGB, what we'll call maybe visible light sensor, can only see so far underwater because of turbidity, what they call snow underwater, and light. You're getting a few feet to a few meters of distance that you can see, and that's just not enough to do the work that's needed underwater.
That
It's
couldn't be
uh
enough above water if you're like, well, we have these amazing cameras. They're 360 degrees,
yeah.
but you can only see this far. People would be like, what?
Right. So in Hollywood, we're looking for pristine conditions. We're going to the best and, most beautiful coral reefs in the world. We're choosing environments that are very attractive to dive and to experience. But in the industrial space, in oil and gas and in aquaculture, in survey inspection, critical infrastructure, defense, you can't see anything until you're right there. And so underwater, you're using sound, you're using sonar, you're using USBL to communicate, and trying to reconstruct the picture the way a dolphin would or a stingray, through different novel types of sensing mechanisms that get you to where you need to go. Then you can use the camera to perform manipulation or do photogrammetry. But sonar is the main sensor that is utilized in subsea robotics. And that's got a number of pros and cons to it. But in terms of storytelling, it's not that great.
This part of all this is kind of mind blowing to me. I mean, I love integrated senses in general, but you really have to integrate sound and sight. I mean, you're pulling the two of them together. What would be, even if you just did like a simplified version of like how what that's like, especially for people that maybe don't understand all the technology. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm working on now and not what Hollywood cared about. But it's important to build a long distance, high fidelity, common operating picture that, understands geometry and distance and 3D space. And sonar captures some of that to some extent, but it doesn't capture color, and it's not millimeter accurate per se. And cameras can do that, and so in lidar to some extent can do that. And so it's very important through metadata and through the synchronization of these sensors, and utilizing all aspects of the vehicle to go through to do a survey, to follow a pipeline, and utilize both sensors and fuse them together, and preferably in real time, to get the best picture for review. And maybe that means you're trying to understand um, the health of a reef. You're trying to understand the rust on a pipeline. You're trying to identify objects in the sand. Sonar can get you close, but you really need to fuse multiple types of sensing mechanisms together, and that's not easy to do or cheap to do at the moment. And these are all different companies that are building different technologies that have different file formats that you're trying to combine together on a small vehicle and go and do these mission sets. And we're trying to bring down the cost, make it easier to understand, require less training, make sure that there's more on the back end for QA and being able to scrub the data. And there's just an infinite number of problems to solve underwater that I think maybe, Tesla and some of the companies that have more cash are solving internally, but really no one in the subsea space has the team and the money to solve all of this at once.
Okay, so you're basically taking and connecting all these different technologies to get rid of some of that, what you would have on land-based capture, some kind of static. And because you need to be able to see, you need to be able to see what's actually happening. And I think that if, you know, could you use a GPS, or does that not kind of work when it comes to underwater exploration and monitoring?
Yeah, so I mean, like above water, you can use the infrared spectrum, and underwater, you cannot. Above water, you have low cost LiDAR. Below water, you have expensive LiDAR. And above water, you have GPS. Below water, you don't have GPS. And through different methodologies of relative positioning and subsea slam, if you can see the bottom, or being able to localize yourself against some fixed known position, you have some sense of GPS. There are a lot more kind of creative ways that you have to back into localization. And so there's no high fidelity map underwater that's even a meter accurate, let alone millimeter accurate, that we can import and give to our operators and our customers. And maybe there are in certain places, but that usually is IP. That's usually not commercially available. And so that's a problem that's going to need to get figured out over a long period of time. And I remember working on the math and hearing this from a friend that to map the ocean at a meter accuracy, I think we would need like over 1,000 autonomous underwater vehicles running perpetually for over 250 years. And so like we just don't have the resources or the need, frankly, to go do that everywhere. And so GPS is there are different ways that we're trying to derive that, but ultimately, if you can either see the bottom or have something what's called USBL or ultra short baseline, you can position yourself against maybe a boat or some structure and then get a GPS coordinate. It's just a different language. It's a different way of thinking than terrestrial and aerial. And we're a little bit further behind, but I think that's what I like about it. It's hard, it's niche, and you really got to be passionate about it because the market just isn't as big.
Right. Well, it reminds, when you say position against boat, I keep on thinking like augmented reality or any of the sort of metaverse spatial tech, that they're like, so we can position it against a building, but then the building is going to be there, whereas the boat is going to move. So you have even that kind of, difficulty.